Hello and welcome to Crossroads of Rockland History. I'm Clare Sheridan from the Historical Society of Rockland County. Today I'll be joined by Peter Bush of Friends of Harmony Hall, the Jacob Sloat House, for a conversation about a fascinating new exhibition on view at the Jacob Sloat House in Sloatsburg. The exhibition is entitled The 7 Taverns Which Saved the Ramapo Pass. This episode of Crossroads of Rockland History is sponsored by the Town of Ramapo, Supervisor Michael Specht, and the Ramapo Town Board. We are grateful for their generous support of this program and of the Historical Society of Rockland County. The Historical Society of Rockland County is a nonprofit educational institution and principal repository for original documents and artifacts relating to Rockland County. Our headquarters in New City include a history museum and the 1832 Jacob Sloat House located at 20 Zucker Road. The site is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and is a designated New York State Path Through History site. Sharing Rockland County's history with the public is at the heart of our mission, and we rely on support from people like you. To become a member, volunteer, or learn more, please visit rocklandhistory.org. Harmony Hall's new exhibition explores the historic taverns that once lined the Clove Road from Suffern to Highland Mills. Stephen Sloat's Tavern in Sloatsburg, Suffern's Tavern, Sidman's in Sloatsburg, Galloway's in Southfields, June's at Harriman, Smith's between Central Valley and Highland Mills, and Earl's in Highland Mills were far more than places to rest and refresh. They were centers of news, politics, travel, and community life during a pivotal era in American history. Timed to coincide with the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, the exhibition at the Jacob Sloat House highlights the often overlooked role of the Ramapo Pass corridor in the fight for independence. We'll also hear a preservation update on Harmony Hall, including its restored front porch and freshly painted exterior. The restoration of the Jacob Sloat House is a remarkable story of perseverance, dedication, and community commitment. Peter Bush, welcome back to Crossroads of Rockland History. Thank you so much for being here today. Before we begin talking about the exhibition at the Jacob Sloat House, would you take a moment and just tell our listeners a little bit about your background?
Hey, well, I am the great-great-great-grandson of Jacob Sloat, the builder of Harmony Hall and one of the principal founders of the Main Street, Sloatsburg. And I'm a founding member of the Friends of Harmony Hall, along with my late dad, the historian Harrison O. Bush Jr.
As we know, we are celebrating the 250th anniversary of American independence this year, and Harmony Hall is using the anniversary to commemorate and share the history of the 7 taverns that saved the Ramapo Pass, right?
Yes, we created 7 taverns that saved the Ramapo Pass with architect Billy Mincy, who's a trustee of the Tuxedo Historical Society, and the source material is to the definitive history of the pass and the highlands by Richard Koch, who wrote The Corridor Through the Mountains many years ago.
We've discussed the Ramapo Pass and its importance to the American cause on this program with County historian Craig Long. Episode 180 from earlier this year, in fact, focused on this overland route. Briefly describe the corridor we're speaking about for people who are just tuning in.
Briefly, my understanding is that the corridor of the taverns extended from Suffern's Tavern through northern Orange County, and the actual creation of the Clove Road started by the Indian footpaths and being expanded under the direction of George Washington, and in part by observations that Charles Clinton in 1735, who was a surveyor, early surveyor of the area, was trying to bring together all these diverse little locales and pre-village designations in Orange County. This is even before Rockland was a county.
Right, exactly. So I always remind people that, during the Revolutionary War, we were part of Orange County. It wasn't until 1798 that Rockland was its own county. The taverns along the route were important as places for food and lodging, of course, but they served another important purpose, didn't they?
Yes, they did. In particular, true of our fortuitous two surviving taverns, Sidman's in the Clove and the Stephen Sloat Tavern. And there's a direct relationship between the two proprietors of those houses because they were brother-in-laws by marriage. They each had married the daughters of Isaac Van Dusen. So that's a brief little genealogy connection. But the Stephen Sloat Tavern is very important, going back to the topography we're talking about. In August of 1774, there was an assembly there with Stephen Sloat present to choose two delegates to the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia. So these taverns played a direct role in the Revolution and the old chestnut that Washington stayed here because Washington did, in fact, visit Stephen Sloat's homestead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it is true. I mean, when people say Washington slept here, he did. He had to
Right,
stay all over the place, so he
right.
did sleep in a lot of places.
And of course, the Clove Road in Sloatsburg was a critical area, which partly was his reason for staying here because of the transportation routes that they were trying to create, and the Sidman's Bridge, and of course, the strategic outpost where the old Presbyterian church is by exit 15A and on
Hmm.
the thruway. That was a critical area for Washington having some troops there throughout the revolution.
And the taverns were also a place where news and important information changed hands, right?
Before Instagram and Facebook, obviously, and being an exhausted traveler, you can only imagine what an arduous journey it was, even between villages. This was the go-to place for food, lodging, and conversation. And for records that we do have, the Sloat Tavern and Sidman's were considered, in addition to Suffern's, I think three of the best taverns along that route because I do chuckle. I don't have time today to go into it, but Richard Koch has wonderful history of comments that people made about other taverns in Orange County, which did not receive such favorable reviews for their lodging and ability to get to them. But the Sloat Tavern, Sidman's, and Suffern Tavern in particular, sadly, which we no longer have on the landscape, were very well received by travelers.
You mentioned that the Suffern Tavern is no longer with us, but there are two surviving taverns, and they
Yes,
are right in the Sloatsburg
right.
corridor. Yeah.
And that is, again, just to recap, that would be Sidman's in the Clove, as it was called, or after Sidman passed away, Widow Sidman's Tavern. And the reason Sidman's was important, it was very close by to encampments and strategic locations in the Clove. And at that point, the Clove had become a major route, much more than a footpath. Even though, again, I do laugh, it was, described as being a viperous den of rattlesnakes by one military person and very difficult to get through. So you can only imagine, having to transport wagons, from different areas to get supplies to an all volunteer militia. I feel always grateful when I see these two places on the landscape. And regard to Sidman's, it's even more important because there is a pre-revolutionary cemetery on that site on the knoll. And for those who don't know where this is, when the leaves are off just south of Auntie Elle's and what's used to be called unincorporated Ramapo, sits Sidman's Tavern, which fortuitously was restored by the developers of the new apartments, Woodgrove Apartments. So that was the gain. The loss, sadly, was there was an original surviving view shed that predates the Lenapes throughout that property, which was retained when the Pearson family owned the house as well. But the great news is that the exterior footprint was beautifully restored.
I always consider this one of the lesser known revolutionary landmarks in Rockland. Not many people are familiar with it. Why do you think it doesn't have more notoriety?
I think it doesn't have more notoriety for practical visual sight lines. As I said, before the Woodgrove Apartments went in, it's hidden for most of the year in a grove of trees. And the other issue is, unlike when I went to school in Suffern High School, I'm now a dinosaur, but I was very grateful that I had three principal historians that imparted history to me: Joseph Grasso, the very well known Gardner Watts, and of course, my late father, Harrison O'Bush Jr. And what has changed is that I personally don't feel that local history or the significance of transformative history in Rockland County has been really presented to students. And sadly, in Sloatsburg, we did an excellent job with a fourth grade history tour annually with Clarence Conklin and my father and the mayors of that period, where the kids would go do a bus tour of all the historic sites in Sloatsburg and then write these wonderful reports on them, some of which I still have. And then we would go in and talk to them in the classroom. Since the change in the classes in Rockland County now, it only goes through kindergarten through second in Sloatsburg. So that has been something that we hope to reinvent in next year, hopefully, because it was critically important. A lot of the kids didn't even know about these sites, when they grew up
Mm-hmm.
here.
The exhibition that you have put together is open at Harmony Hall by appointment, right?
That's correct. It is by reservation. You call 845-712-5220, and I or another board member will get back to you. It will be up probably through next year because, as a lot of historians had said, the 250th really doesn't end this year.
Mm-hmm.
So we do anticipate keeping it up. It's not as elaborate as the gorgeous installations that the Rockland County Historical Society does, which I highly recommend seeing, about Revolution 250. It's an incredible exhibit, but this does give you a wonderful, respectful overview of the seven taverns, what they look like, their biographies, and in specifically the Sloatsburg corridor.
In addition to seeing the exhibit, visitors can also see the great progress that you've made on restoring the Jacob Sloat House. I really enjoyed reading your recent piece about preservation perseverance.
Thank you.
It's very true. And when it comes to historic preservation, perseverance is the key. So, talk a little bit about what's gone on.
Historic preservation is not a priority really as we go forward, from my experience. And the saving of Harmony Hall started in fall of 2004, actually. And then the Friends of Harmony Hall were conceived in 2006. So when I say long, it's been a very long process. The projects have all been, the significant restorations of the house have all been accomplished by our board from the events that we have produced over the years, principally our two signature music festivals, which were an annual event. So the three principal restorations that were critical to stabilize the house, which were really 20 years in the making, started in 2023 when the interior project of the grand staircase restoration, the deteriorated plaster walls, the archway, the window, were all reinstated. And it's really magnificent because that had been ripped out when it was an elder care facility for most of its 20th century history. The second project was restoration of three parlor windows, which speak to the engineering marvel that Harmony Hall is under Jacob Sloat's aesthetic. And they have also provided more energy efficiency, but they also, again, showed what engineering was like in 1848. And their floor-to-ceiling windows with unique offset window panes, which people comment on. So they're magnificent. And then last year, as you know, which was literally 20 years of fundraising, was the restoration of the front veranda, or we call the front porch of Harmony Hall. And that entailed totally redoing major support systems, totally rebuilding the north part of the porch, which had been torn off completely when it was an elder care facility. And so there was a non-historic room that we called the bump out removed. and it's really breathtaking. I don't think it's hyperbole. We had raccoons living in the roof. We had major decay that required 4x4 supports, as many historic sites do early on, just to make sure that the decking stayed stable to produce events. So the results are magnificent. The contractor was Hudson View Construction, William Friedlich, and the visual standards really are very respectful to the original aesthetic that Jacob Sloat had.
Yeah, it really does change the feel and look of it entirely. And then after all of the wood and so forth rested, and it's now been painted as well, which is another just aesthetic transformation, really, with the new
Well,
paint.
yes, I mean, that was critical. And again, we had advocated and raised money. When we had the house listed at the state national registers, it was all done in one day with the OPRHP. And we had to, the day of the site visits with Bill Crattinger, we literally had to take off the aluminum siding, 10 feet of aluminum siding on the pier ante and the front porch to show OPRHP that, yes, in fact, the basic bones of the house still survived. And in July, we thankfully had the clapboard prepped and painted. And I hope it basically dismisses any remaining cynics in the community who have disparaged the project for visually not being very pleasing for many decades. And it really does, between the porch and the painting, I think the most cynical person can see the potential in this great project.
Absolutely. And as you said, it's now been 20 years, over 20
Yes,
years that
over
this,
20
yeah.
years, and it's because it's an all volunteer board. We're not at a point, some boards, as you well know, have end up evolving to a point where they have paid board members, and it's far more elaborate, for lack of a better word. But this is a definitive small town project that has moved forward on the sheer will and limited resources of an all volunteer board.
And really just grassroots fundraising over many, many years. Describe the kind of events and programs Harmony Hall produces.
Since our inception, we have prided ourselves on not just being open on a museum basis, like once a month or that kind of a calendar. We attempt to have monthly events. That's been our history. And they range about the arts, music, history, archaeology, Lenape history. Jeff Welch, our late curator, did significant work with the watershed and the importance of the watershed, which is another issue I hope we touch on and why preservation is important. But we've had wonderful guests. We've had Ed Lenick, who's an author and archaeologist, this spring for Women's History Month. We have a wonderful relationship once a year with the esteemed author Eve M. Khan, who writes these incredibly interesting books about forgotten women artists and movers and shakers in 19th century New York. And then our music festivals, which were our Bluegrass Festival and our Grateful Dead concert. So it's very diverse. Our upcoming events now we're looking forward to because of prep work still at the house is the December 13th Victorian holiday. And I'm also excited to announce that I've been working on a documentary about my late father, Harrison, which I did 4 hours of filming with him in January 2020. And I've been working slowly with an editor, and we're going to do a rough cut screening about him, his World War II years on September the 19th. That's the date, and I will have more information about that. We hope to invite the local historical society members for this, and I think it will be a future resource for educators and local historians.
That's great. Oh, I can't wait for that. That will be terrific. Talk a little bit about the watershed. I think that's important as it relates to historic preservation.
I preface that I'm not an expert, but a lot of what I learned was through Jeff Welsh. And most people don't realize that drinking water for New Jersey and at one point New York City was all the result of management in our areas, including Sterling Forest, which is why people have been fighting. Just, it's still under attack for development. And the aquifer system is critically important because the aquifers are a natural purification system. The Ramapo River has actually, even from my layman's view, has been hard hit in the last 10 years by overdevelopment north of Sloatsburg. You can definitely see the impact, especially when there hasn't been rain. And that's a direct result of water draw north of here in Orange County with significant overdevelopment. So development, land management, and I will add, one would pray and hope for consistent zoning are components that are critical not only to historic preservation sites and land use, but our natural resources. And I frankly think that it's not really well known by a lot of people, and it certainly is not being respected to a place where future generations can be involved in historic preservation and the beauty and intrinsic history that made these communities, such as Harmony Hall, the Sloat House, Simmons and the Clove, other sites in Rockland County. We've lost so much. And I will do a shout out in recent days to Clarkstown. The Clarkstown Community Preservation Act was just recently passed, and I think that deserves a lot of recognition. And I will add, as an advocate for historic sites in the town of Ramapo, I think it's something that needs to be done in the town of Ramapo. If we're going to save historic sites, view sheds, and be responsible custodians of shrinking land resources.
Hmm. I do agree. I think every town should take a look at that and really try to replicate that because it's very important. As you said, the view shed, natural resources, and just the way that we live within our communities. We've got to be able to build responsibly and we've got to be able to zone places responsibly so that future generations have the natural resources they need to survive. So I agree. I think it's a commendable
And
thing, and we should look into it further.
and one last thing, if I may, on this on what you're talking about. Just because a site is listed on the state national registers does not mean it is safe, and people need to understand that. Case in point, again, a local story in Journal News: the demolition in Nyack of Shadow Cliff, which was a major historic estate in Nyack, served for as a religious order housing for many years. But that's what concerns me the most, that there is this kind of disposable mentality still instead of true revitalization. Revitalization has economic benefits. And then, speaking to your point that we've talked about for many years, if you don't know where you've come from and you don't respect the history or founding families in a community, you lose a great deal. So you have to ask yourself, do I want to live on like a Route 22 environment in New Jersey where it is nothing but urban sprawl? Or do I want to have touchstones of the history of the community to look back to
Hmm.
and value and enjoy in a community?
Absolutely right. I mean, you think about all the places that people find charming, and, they're places that respected history. They've created historic districts, historic
Mhm.
areas, and have tried to put a little bit of a stopgap to instant demolition permits. And,
Right.
you think about Shadow Cliff, it housed the Fellowship of Reconciliation, which was
Mhm.
the oldest peace organization in the United States.
Right.
And most people are not aware of how significant that was to the civil rights movement and the peace
Mhm.
movement and the anti-war movement. And it
Mhm.
definitely needed TLC, no question about it. I mean, it was
Mhm.
in a rough state, but in addition to being an important building, it housed a very important
Mhm.
organization. My hope is that people won't forget about Fellowship of Reconciliation. It's still an active organization. They
Mhm.
still do amazing work, but certainly our local understanding of it will
Mhm.
be lost by losing the place, unfortunately.
Absolutely, because these sites are connected with community service and philanthropy, including Jacob Sloat, who built two churches in Sloatsburg, had workers' housing, which was a very new idea on Mill Street. And I just quickly wanted to also note, related to this, it's very sad to me that, Bruce Price, a famous American architect, one of the principal designers of early small houses in Tuxedo Park, his concept was he would look at a site and the house would accommodate the site. And we've lost that connection to our environment, and it's emblematic in Rockland County. I do not think it's acceptable for any institution, organization, or entity to justify clear cutting hundreds of acres, which has been going on rampant. If you need to come into a community and do a true environmental impact study and see how you conserve the site, not eradicate a landscape which is critical to habitat and water preservation and the wonderful animals that we have here. I mean, it's really that I see that as being a very sad situation, that I'm actually in a community living amongst that right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The rest of the community.
Mhm.
Well, once again, it's been great speaking with you. Tell us again one more time
Mhm.
how visitors who are interested in coming to this exhibit on the Seven Taverns and to see the new beautiful preservation efforts that you guys have undertaken.
Feel free to call 845-712-5220. And I'm always happy to meet people on site, for a scheduled meeting or a tour and get to know Sloatsburg. It is a walkable village, and there are many positives on that little main street in terms of local business owners. And in this revolutionary 250 year, I think it would be a trip well worth it. Good eats on Main Street, too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Peter, thank you so much again for
Thank you,
being with me
Claire.
on Crossroads. And certainly we will be looking forward to that documentary about Harrison Bush, and certainly the holiday programming, which is always nice to attend. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And to recap, the exhibition, The Seven Taverns Which Saved the Ramapo Pass, is on view now at the Jacob Sloat House in Sloatsburg. Visits are available by appointment. To schedule a visit, contact Friends of Harmony Hall at 845-712-5220 or visit friendsofharmonyhall.org. The exhibition is based on a 5-part series of articles by Richard J. Koch, published in volumes 19 through 23 of the Orange County Historical Society's journal between 1990 and 1994. Those articles are being made available on the Orange County Historical Society's website. This episode of Crossroads of Rockland History has been sponsored by the Town of Ramapo, Supervisor Michael Specht, and the Ramapo Town Board. We extend our thanks for their generous support of the Historical Society of Rockland County and this program. And while we're talking about the American Revolution, we invite you to visit the Historical Society of Rockland County's current exhibition, Rockland and the Revolution, a 250th anniversary exploration, on view now through October 26th. This exhibition takes a deeper look at the War for Independence through the work of notable Rockland County historians, past and present. Exhibition hours are Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday from noon to 4 p.m., and tours of the historic Jacob Sloat House are offered on Sundays at 1, 2, and 3 p.m. Appointments are also welcome at other times. Visit rocklandhistory.org for upcoming events, programs, and more information. Another great way to keep up with what's making history in Rockland is to follow the Historical Society on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Tumblr. Look for our popular Flashback Friday posts and our new feature in the Rockland County Times, Rockland Remembers. You can find more than 180 episodes of Crossroads of Rockland History on our website and on all major podcast platforms. I'm Clare Sheridan. Thanks for listening to Crossroads of Rockland History.